honored and humbled to have honor guard here from the United States Armed Forces to do taps and the flag presentation. Peggy, at this time we're going to ask the gentleman to come forward. Please rise for taps.
behalf of the President of the United States Army and this graceful nation, please accept this flag as a symbol of appreciation for your loved one, honorable and grateful service. So for your loved one.
Again, we want to thank the Honor Guard from the United States Army for the flag presentation and the bugle playing taps. By way of introduction, my name is David Jacobson, and I'm just a friend of the family. I'm not a clergy, but I'm here to help the family. We begin the ceremony with the cutting of the ribbon of tearing of the cloth called kriya. In the times when before we became Jews, the Semites would tear their clothes, and it was an outward sign of mourning. Keep in mind, people did not have a tent full of clothes. And even the best tailor or seamstress would sew it up. They knew someone died. When we got our Bible, there are 613 commandments in it. There's stories when Jacob heard that Joseph died, he tore his clothes. Of the 613 commandments, most people associate with the Big Ten. The first 5 relate to man and God, the second 5 man to man. And number 5 says, Kibud av va'em, honor your mother and father. I think you gentlemen did a great job of honoring your father. Mother too, your father. We're going to say a blessing, and the last words of the blessing are the word emet, which means truth. It's spelled Aleph, Mem, Tuf. Aleph is the first, Mem is the middle, Tuf is the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And the idea that you all have your own truths with him. So I asked the 2 sons to rise, and if you notice, they're wearing it over the heart. Only the children of the deceased wear it over the heart. A spouse, God forbid, a child, if I had a child who died, or a spouse, or a sibling, you'd wear it on the right side. And you're in mourning longer than anyone. So I ask the 2 of you to rise, and please rise, and say the blessing with me. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Dayan ha'emet. Folks, there are seats over here. We have a lot of seats on this side too. Okay. We begin the ceremony with the 23rd Psalm, and you have it on your service folder. We read together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. This time we formally welcome everyone here and those of you who are online. Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, yehi shem Adonai mevorach. God is given and God is taken away. Praise be the name of God. We read from the High Holiday Liturgy, birth is a beginning and death a destination. But life is a journey, a going, a growing, from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity and youth to age. From innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom. From weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again. From health to sickness, and back we pray to health again. From offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith. From defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination. Life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage made stage by stage, from birth to death to life everlasting. We read from Ecclesiastes, "For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to cry and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek, a time to lose, a time to keep, a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak." And at this time, I invite Marc to come forward and share some words.
Just in case. For 91 years, 11 months and 3 days, Dad was the beloved son of Morris and Bella Tepper and the brother of Rose, Francis, and Marian. For 77 years, he was the brother-in-law of Donna, of Joel, Sam, Lenny, Marvin, of blessed memory. And still with us, Louis, Kandi, and Fred. For 75 years, he was an uncle to many nieces and nephews. For 67 years, he was the loving and adorable husband to Grace, losing her just over a year ago was hard and difficult, but his love endured. He loved her dearly. For 65 years, he was a wonderful dad to me, our late sister Robin, and David. For 38 years, he was a father-in-law to Carrie and Lori. For 33 years, he was the proud grandfather to Samantha and Sean, Daniel, Sarah, Joshua and Sam, and Isaac. And for the last year and a half, he has been the beaming grandfather to Aurora and Grace, the second loves of his life. He was truly an amazing man and had quite a life. So we are here today to celebrate his life and what it gave to each and every one of us. He came from a home of immigrant parents who made family a number one priority. Many extended members of the family lived in the same apartment building or just down the street. Some of his early road trips were to Denver to visit family, but mostly he talked about spending time out on Tobacco Road on the Fox River at a summer home his father built. A graduate of Von Steuben High School, he would apprentice at the family printing company, Tepper Press, under his father's watchful eye. A friend reminded me of how he used to proofread an article or document. Today you use spell check or grammar check, but back in the day, you started at the end of the article and read the words backwards to catch any errors. Even just a few weeks ago, he called the Chicago Tribune to complain about a spelling mistake. Then came the Korean War, and he enlisted in the Army. After basic training, as his company was about to deploy, a lieutenant came along and asked if anybody knew anything about printing. Well, Dad's hand flew up, along with two others, and they were reassigned to the 1st Loudspeaker and Leaflet Company. He and his buddies would crank out thousands of leaflets and ads which were dropped on Korean villages. He was able to stay out of the foxholes and mud, but he did see action and served his country with distinction. Dan and I took him to Washington, D.C. just a couple of years ago, and he was mesmerized by the Monument Mall. We sat for hours at the Lincoln Memorial, just watching people go by. He wore his Korean veteran hat, and there was no shortage of kids and adults who asked him some questions, thanked him for his service, and I realized I was watching an American hero. Returning from the war, he was reacquainted with Grace, the first love of his life. Their love lasted for 67 years. They were devoted to each other. They were soulmates and would spend the rest of their lives together. Rarely apart for just a day or two, they were a fun couple and a joy to be around. I came along a couple of years later. Yes, I am the oldest. Then Robin, and then David. We had moved to Highland Park, Kishnev, as my grandparents would call it, into a new neighborhood with kids in just about every house. Mom was a school nurse, and Dad would commute to 216 West Jackson Boulevard, the 10th floor, to own and operate Tepper Press Printing Company. Dad made a comfortable living, and our family vacations soon become adventures, and they were legendary. A train trip to Florida to see Bubby and Pa. I don't know how he did it, but somehow he convinced Mom to take the 3 children with him on a train ride down to Florida. 3 days to Florida. Well, he hopped on a plane, and he met us at the Florida station. Not often did he get the best of Mom, but this was definitely a win. Pop bought a lifetime pass to the national parks, and we visited many throughout the years. They instilled a love in me of the park system, and in turn, I've tried to pass that along to my children. But our best and most memorable adventure had to be the year Pop rented an RV motorhome, and we headed east to Maine and down the coast to New York. Backing up was a little bit difficult in this big RV. But while Robin directed him in reverse and said, "Keep going, keep going, keep going," there was a loud bang and a huge jet of water. Of course, she had directed him into a fire hydrant, which was spraying water everywhere. Well, he took off like a bat out of hell. Sorry, Salem, Massachusetts. We also became world travelers with a trip to Italy and Israel. Dad would like to boast that he was the closest to the moon the night Neil Armstrong set foot on the surface. We were flying home over the Atlantic, so at 35,000 feet, I guess he was technically correct. These were precious and fun times. When Pop decided to retire, they moved to a house in Lincolnshire, which became the hangout for his grandchildren and friends. There were campouts in the living room, marshmallow roasting in the fireplace for s'mores, but mostly adventures. Modeling the book, We Are Going on a Bear Hunt, the kids took walk in the forest behind the home. Armed with flashlights, sometimes under umbrellas, there was a search for bears. They usually ran into deer or other wildlife, but the best scare was when Uncle David did his bear impression and chased everybody out of the forest. They traveled around the globe, sometimes with family and other times with friends. He funded most of these adventures from the items he sold at the flea markets. Pop always had a gimmick. One time he was giving away copies of enlarged money that he had printed. It was such a hit, it drew the attention of the Secret Service. Unfortunately for Pop, they arrived while Mom was manning the booth. Let's just say that car ride was loud going home. The 7 Mile Fair, McGuanago, the Evanston garage sale, he was there hawking his latest items. Leather products, pads and pads and pads of paper, and scratch pad. Who could forget the legendary imported Chinese yo-yos? The sales got them to China and Hong Kong, Japan, England, and Spain. Fortunately, or maybe unfortunately, there were hours and hours of slides from each trip. Now digitally restored and on his laptop, somewhere in a file. Then the devastating news. They were selling their home in Illinois and purchasing another in Delray Beach, Florida. I'm looking at you, Sandy. They enjoyed their life in Florida. Mom was able to work on her artistic inner self, and Dad could go to the pool, play cards, and lounge around. Well, his lounging around didn't last very long, and he took a part-time position with the local ABC liquor store. I don't think he cared about the job, but he loved the free stuff, the giveaways. And he met a guy named George and his wife Lucille, and they would become best friends. They were like teenagers again, hanging out at each other's home, having dinners out, or just cruising down the strip. The Annunziatos were very supportive to Dad once Mom was moved to the Alzheimer's facility. His friend George passed away about 3 weeks ago, and I am sure they are palling around again. Speaking of cards, some of you know that he and his siblings were card sharks. He played everything: casino, hearts, spades, gin, cribbage, canasta, but his favorite was pinochle. He had a regular Thursday night game with friends in Highland Park, and when he moved to Florida, he found a game at the clubhouse. But poker was another love. He played on the train from Chicago to Highland Park after a day at work and funded a couple of his and Mom's trips. There were days he could win $300 in a half-and-one game in just under an hour. So he knew how to play and how to win. The family games were not about winning, but about strategy and understanding. When he and his sisters played, it didn't matter who won. Okay, sometimes it mattered who won. But did you play the hand correctly? I can't tell you how many times I heard, but I told you what I had by the way I was betting. I told you. As kids, we learned to play by the Tepper rules, and he enjoyed playing with the family. Once he returned to Chicago, he and Dan would play hours on end. And I'm not sure who to believe, but either Pop owed Dan $354 or Dan owes Pop $432.16. Whichever it is, it was about the time being spent with family. The last 16 months was an honor and pleasure having him live with Carrie and I. We protected him against the pandemic. He spent time with Dan, Sam, and Sean. He went to Colorado for Sam and Sean's wedding. Visits from David, Lori, and Isaac were meaningful. And he enjoyed seeing Sarah, Josh, Sam, and Aurora, albeit from a distance. He endured another cold Chicago winter, but he walked every day. He shoveled snow, and when the weather was nice, he sat outside enjoying his Sudoku puzzles and being here with family. Finally, he was witness to the birth of his second great-grandchild, Grace, just a month ago. Dad was successful in doing everything he wanted during his lifetime. I was recently reminded that time is finite. It does not stop. It does not bend. It constantly moves. Dad took advantage of time to spend it with his lovely wife, Grace, with family, with friends, and enjoyed life to its fullest. He was the winner in the battle with time. I just wish I was able to spend just a little more time with him. Dad, you will be missed, and I love you.
Thanks. What beautiful words. Before we conclude, it's always appropriate to talk about something about the weekly Torah portion and how it relates to Samuel. Here we are on Erev Shabbat, and it's a special time. They say that when one, as a service, that they ascend faster to the Olam Haba, the world to come. This week's Torah portion is a double portion called Matot Maseh. Matot meaning the word tribes, and Masay, a journey, a traveler. As you listened, or as I listened to Marc's words, I thought of several things. First of all, Samuel died on July 3rd, the day before Independence Day. Here is a proud veteran. And maybe it was just with what's going on in the world, he said, you celebrate the way you want, I need to go on my journey. Matot, it means tribe. He had many. The most important one was his family. And as you can see here, all the people. And I love the fact that he had one more great-grandchild named after his wife, Grace. And how lucky are we to be graced by all of you and by his story. His other tribe was the military, also represented here today. And we have to never forget the people that did what they did for the benefit of us. And people can have different political views on wars or on anything, it seems today. But if it weren't for people like him, we wouldn't have the freedoms that we have today. And that needs to be honored, needs to be recognized. Masay is journey. What a great story about the train. That was great. You go for 3 days, I'll fly. The motorhome, a journey. And think about how he did all his other journeys. He worked for it. Besides the Tepper press, the flea markets, the poker, here was a person who wasn't handed anything and who created everything. And many of us here today come from immigrant families. We had nothing. And what a great story for the children, the grandchildren, and the great-grandchildren. Because we are a fortunate people. And it's people like Mr. Tepper that give us the example. You do good, you show up, you care about humanity. You also gamble a little. And you can travel, you can see, but most of all, you live. And in Hebrew, the word life is spelled chaim in Hebrew. It's chet yud yud mem sofit. And the two middle letters are God's name, yud yud. In English, it's life. 2 middle letters are if. Sam didn't live an if life. He lived a sacred life. And he lived every ounce that he could pull out of it. So when you walk away today, think about what you can do to emulate his life and how you could benefit humanity. And if something's important to you, work for it, because that's what I got from him. That's the story, that's the lesson that I got. And I think it's a privilege to work. It's a privilege to be able to do things and then have the opportunity to do whatever you want to do with those rewards that you worked so hard for. In a moment, we're going to say the memorial prayer. The memorial prayer is never the same. It's never the same at a funeral, because we mention the person's name. And it's important to say the name, Samuel Tepper, and never to forget about his name. So I'll read in Hebrew, and then ask you to rise as we read together in English. El malei rachamim, shochen bamromim, hamtzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei ashchina, im kedoshim v'torim, kezor haraki amazirim, et nishmat Shlomo ben Moshe, shalach leolamo, Ba'al harachamim yastirehu b'seter k'nafav leolamim, v'yitzur ha'chaim et nishmato. Adonai hu nachalato v'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo, v'nomar amen. We read together in English. Please rise. El malei rachamim, O God full of compassion, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of thy presence among the holy and pure, who shine as the brightness of the firmament unto the soul of Samuel Tepper, who has gone unto eternity. Lord of mercy, bring him under the cover of thy wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be God's possession. May his repose be peace. Amen. Before we read the Kaddish, just by way of explanation, the word Kaddish just means sanctity or holiness. Marriage is called Kiddushin in Aramaic, holiness. When one prays, we say Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Tonight, as you sit around the Shabbat table, you don't call bracha shal yain, a blessing of the wine, you call it Kiddush, because the family's together. The work we do at a funeral home is called Chevra Kedisha, holy society or sacred society. And lastly, where we keep the Holy Torah is called Aron HaKodesh, a container of the holy. And it was written in Aramaic, the Kaddish. And really it's just a group of adjectives about God. But when they added the last line, they added it in Hebrew, the holy language of our people, which is now the common language, and it speaks only of peace, shalom. But what's fascinating about that word shalom, which means hello, goodbye, and peace, the root word is shalem, completeness. He lived 91 years. We say the mourner's Kaddish. Yit gadal v'yikadash shemei rabbah, v'alma divra chirutei v'amlich malchutei, v'chaye echon u'v'yom echon u'v'chaye echol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'izman kariv v'yimeru amen. Yehi shmei rabbah mevorach leolam lo me'omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yit hadar, v'yit alev, v'yit alal, shmei dekudesha b'rechu. Le'elam yinkol birchata v'shirata, tush bechata v'nechamata, dam iran bi'alma v'yimru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Please be seated. There's one last journey that Samuel is making, and he made it yesterday, and he went to Florida he's going to have a private interment at the South Florida National Cemetery. And that's where he'll be with his wife. And isn't it appropriate that he's at a national cemetery? And not everybody gets that honor, and not everybody wants that honor. And I think he got both. Memorial contributions in his memory to the Riverside Foundation or the Morris Life Foundation. That information is on the service folder. Everyone is invited to the Tepper residence at 484 Satinwood Terrace in Buffalo Grove today following the service. And for those of you online, that information is on our service folder. Two other thoughts before we conclude. One is, as Shabbat is this Shabbat morning, we'll read the Matot Maseh. This is the last Torah portion of the book Bamidbar, of the fourth book. And at the end, when we finish the Torah, we say, Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek. We go from strength to strength. He was a strong man. Some things happen by happenstance. I don't know that today. He died the day before Independence Day. The Torah portion describes his life. And I think that there's a lot to learn here. And I only hope that you, the family, have a tremendous amount of strength to carry on and also to live, because it does take strength to live. And lastly, we say to the family these beautiful words that really emanate from the second temple that Herod built. He had, on the southern entrance, there were uneven stairs. The reason he built uneven stairs on the southern entrance was after the ceremonies of the Holy Temple, people really wanted to get out fast, but you can't run on uneven stairs. However, there were certain people who would go up those stairs, and those people were mourners. And they could tell they were mourners because their clothes were ripped. And if you look at the back of the service folder, you'll find those words, and in Hebrew, it clearly explains that you should be comforted with the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem under the gates. And it was really a tachless sentence because they wanted people to know as they were going up, the people were coming down, that they said something profound to the mourners and not just ignored them. So I say to you, Hamakom yanachem etchem b'toch sha'ar avlei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. You should be comforted with all the mourners of Zion and your community and your tribes, as we all say, Amen. This time I invite everyone to please rise and stand in place as we escort the family of Samuel Tepper from the chapel and then you may return to your cars, and the family will be at the Shiva home momentarily.